I want to get it over. Hello, my name is Andres Leon. This is my final project presentation for C programming for embedded systems. So the classic programming problem that I chose for my project is how do you program a trivia game for two players? I decided to make it a Beatles themed trivia game because I really like the Beatles and their music, and I thought it would be fun to make a trivia game about their history and their music and so on. So in order for a trivia game to be successful, it needs to be able to perform the following functions correctly. And that is to present questions to the players by turns and allow them to select a question and an answer for every turn. It needs to be able to define correct answers and wrong answers and keep the score of each player. And then at the end of the game, once all of the questions have been answered, it needs to be able to compare scores and declare a winner and a loser or a tie, depending on the situation, of course. So in order to present the questions, what I did is that I defined a struct with sub-items as character strings. And these are going to be our questions, our answers, and our explanations. And I also declared a character variable called correct ans, which is going to be assigned to A, B, C, or D, depending on the situation. So the name of the struct is trivia question. And over here, I define the maximum length of the questions, the answers, the explanations, and the total number of questions that we're going to use. I like to point out that I included the C-type header files so that I can use the function toUpper. And this function, what it does is that it takes the input from the user and always converts it to an uppercase letter. Because if the user selects the correct letter, but it's in a lowercase, we still want it to count as a correct answer, right? And I also use the string header files because I want to be able to use string copy to assign text to my questions. So over here we have I declared an array called quest, short for question, of course. And every single element in the array is gonna correspond to one question in the game, right? So over here I would assign the text and for my questions and my answers. And for example, over here in the first question, the correct answer will be A. And this one over here is the last question, and it will be B. So I have 12 copies of this block of code, but I thought it would be redundant to include every single one of them. So over here, I only included the first one and the last one. And in order to display these questions to the players, I use a for loop starting at I equals to 0 with the condition of I less than 12. And so that way, once we have answered all of the questions, the game ends and we can follow on to comparing the user scores. So over here we have an example of the output screen. So as you can see, we have 12 questions over here, each one with different levels of difficulty. We have questions with 100 points, 200 points, and 300 points. And with different categories, controversies, Beatlemania, songs, and fifth Beatles. So in order for our users to select questions and answers, I use a modulus operator and a series of if and else statements and the scan function. So in order to alternate between the users so that they can play the game by turns, I use the I modulus 2. And if the I modulus 2 is equal to 0, it will be the turn of player 1. And if it's equal to 1, it will be the turn of player 2. So that in that case, in the cases of I equals 0, 2, 4, and so on, it will be the turn of player 1. And in the cases of I equals 1, 3, 5, and so on, it will be player 2. So then after that, I use a scan statement so that the user can select the question that they want. Then I use the print function so that it displays the questions and the answers. And once again, another scan function, so the user can select the the answer they want. One thing I'd like to point out is that I used the um, the element for the question array is gonna be user input minus one, because that way, if the user wants to answer question number one, that question is actually gonna be assigned to element zero in the array. So that way, we'll get the corresponding question. This is an example of the output screen. So over here we have player one and player two. For this project, I simulated a game between player one and player two, in which player one gets only one question right and player two gets zero questions right. So they should end with 100 points on player one and 0 points on player two. So in order to evaluate our answers, I use if and else statements. And what I did is that I compared the user answer, which we had gathered from the scan function previously, and I compared it to the correct answer. So if the correct answer and the user answer are the same, then they'll get a correct message, and their number of points that they have will be updated to the number of points that had before, plus the number of points corresponding to the question that they had just answered correctly, right? And of course, the number of points of that question will be later updated to zero, so that players cannot get any more points from that question because it was already used. However, if the user does not get the question right and their answer is not equal to the correct answer, then they'll get a wrong message and their points will not be updated. However, the points of the question will be updated to zero nonetheless, so that players can not get any more points from that question because they already know the right answer. And over here we have two examples, again, of player number one and player number two. In this case, player number one gets the first question correct, and player number two gets the last question wrong. Every single time they always get an explanation text for the right answer. In order to keep the score, what I did is that I declared integer variables called player one points and player two points, and I assigned them to zero. And then I assign points to every single question by making an array called question points, and it's gonna be of the length of total questions. And over here, as you could see before, here's where I use the variables that are assigned to their points. So we have another example of the output screen, and over here, player number one answered question number one correctly. So the number of points of question number one is updated to zero, and the number of points of player number one is updated to 100. However, for this other case, player number two answered question number 12, and they answered it incorrectly. So their number of points did not update, but question number 12 was still assigned to 0 points, so that players cannot get any more points from that. And then finally, once all of the questions have been answered and we're out of the for loop that we had created before, we start comparing the scores by using if and else statements. And so in this case, if player one points are greater than player 2 points, then we get a message of player one wins, and we display the amount of points that each got. And vice versa, if player 2 points is greater than player 1 points, then player two is declared the winner. If they're equal, then it's going to be declared as a tie. And over here, we have an example of the output screen in which player one wins by 100 points and player two loses by 0 points. Thank you.